Welcome back. We've got a really cool piece here. This is the Brownells 601 from the Retro line, replicating the first AR-15 to ever enter U.S. military service. Coming up next on GBGuns. A very cool piece in from... Wait a minute. This is not the 601, not at all, but does serve to show us an example of an ultra-modern AR, which will help contrast nicely with this very classic AR that we've got. So this is just a personal project build that I did recently. We've got adjustable gas block, crazy muzzle device, fluted barrel, rifle length gas system. Of course, it's skeletonized for really no weight savings whatsoever, just being cool. But to keep gas out of the face, got one of these nice improved charging handles. Obviously gas is going to be all over the place. It's just a fun build, but I wanted to have it here so that you got something to look at to realize just how far the AR has come. It does come with an original waffle style magazine, which is pretty cool. And let's get these positioned here so you can see both. So on the original, some things hadn't been thought of yet, deemed necessary, whether or not they really were. For example, our brass deflector is pretty minimal. It's really just kind of a gate at the end here. Even on this modern minimalist build, we have a large lump big enough for my finger to fit in there to help direct brass away from people right next to you and from the shooter. No forward assist. Forward assist hadn't been deemed necessary yet, and what do you know, fast forward a couple decades and nowadays most builds don't have a forward assist. Now when I was in the Army, we got taught to use that forward assist. That was like the first thing you did when stuff didn't happen right, aside from make sure the magazine was seated. Pull to observe the chamber, reach on the charging handle, tap the forward assist, then squeeze the trigger. Sports, that was the acronym. But anyways, the forward assist was driven home as something really vital in case you ended up like that with the bolt not all the way in. And what's funny about that is that was from crazy generals, and one thing I learned from my 15 years in the Army is most officers don't know what it's like on the field. So the same people dictating things like that needing to happen are usually the least experienced in it. It's kind of backwards. I think if it were a free market style of leadership, most of them would be fired. Anyways, because if you're firing and you get around that doesn't chamber all the way, right, your bolt hasn't closed to there, what could be the cause? Well, lots of terrible things probably mean you don't want 50,000 plus PSI going off in your chamber. You could have an obstruction, you could have a horribly mutilated cartridge, all kinds of things that say don't shoot. So no forward assist is something that I'm moving back to in support of. And plus it keeps the gun lighter and slimmer. Look how thin this thing is without any of that sticking out. So Stoner was onto something. These 601s, as far as I can tell, were actually built by Colt. It was after Armalite had sort of given up. They sold the rights to Colt. Colt still produced them, although they were still marked Armalite. So, no forward assist there. No fencing around the magazine release. Even on our crazy skeleton modern build, you can see we've got all of this to protect this button from getting bumped. Is that important or not? I don't know. I think that comes down to individual discipline and environments. So, certainly someone slinging it for left hand would run the risk of this getting bumped, but it's got a pretty tough spring in there. You'll notice there is no relief for the pivot pin spring that normally sits in there on current production guns. That's because this pivot pin is the retainer, the detent and spring. It's actually built into the pin, which is kind of cool. Helps keep things slim there. We also have 0 markings for where the fire control group is from the side. Is it on safe? Is it on semi? You you can't tell. There's no indicator. So a little rough for left-handed. I think having that be visible on this side probably came about later on. Once again, simply as a way of being able to check on your Joes, look at your soldier's weapon, and immediately know is it safe for fire. At the time, that was not a concern. You can also see this swell here for the spring and detent that holds your takedown pin. We've got a very, very small charging handle that is ergonomic. Easy to grab, it works very well. Would be terrible with a scope on it, but since you have a fixed carrying handle, there's not much you can do for a scope. There is that hole there, and believe it or not, the M16A2 that I took in Afghanistan, I mounted a scope to, even though it had an integrated carrying handle much like this. There was a mount that went through here and clamped on and rested a rail in this groove up here. How precise was it? Well, it was precise enough. I don't know if I trust it for winning any matches or anything, but it did its job. So you also have the older style clock for adjusting your sight. No windage adjustment, or no elevation adjustment back here. Sorry. Yeah, that is your left and right. You can't do much for elevation. You do have dual peep sights that flip. That is in there really stiff. There we go. Between a small aperture and a larger aperture. Triangular handguard, which is coming back thanks to folks like Luth AR. I find these to be really comfortable. They're also very easy to get a steady position with. Looking at, we do have the bayonet lug. Our front sight post is more modern style. Everything has this nice phosphate finish to it. Rather thin barrel, and one of these duckbill slash tri-prong flash hiders that make that ringing sound every time something happens. That kind of reminds me of not long ago when the Surefire mount muzzle devices were really cool. That ding drives me nuts at the range. I'm hoping this one won't be too obnoxious. Coming down the rest here, we have our zero drop straight comb style stock and no storage in the back, very much like the BRN 10 that you saw on the channel just recently. And coming on the other side, we've got a modern style paddle bolt release and catch. Very simple markings, very classic looking gun. One thing that I really appreciate that Brownells did here, once again, these slip rings are a little tough to do when you don't have something to push against. I'm going to cheat and push against the tripod here. Is not only do we have triangular handguards that split down the side, but we've got some nice, handsome heat shielding in here. You can see it remains open at the top to come out these vent holes, and closed off at the bottom where your hand might be, and then kind of directs it and opens it where the vent holes are on the bottom. Another cool thing they did, I've got to flip the rifle around here, is we've got a 1 in 12 twist. I've never shot a barrel with that style of twist. It's a rather slow twist. The first M16s were 1 in 14 as I've read, and then they moved to 1 in 12. 1 in 12 is going to be better with lighter weight bullets. It's said to be okay with your 55 grains and 60 grain, but that's also internet lore, and as we've proven in the past, if you've got good concentric bullets, it's not quite so twist rate important or critical as you might have been led to believe. We put totally wrong weight bullets through a good barrel, good bullets, and had no issues. Separate this, we'll take a look inside. I love this gray finish, the gray and green. That custom rifle that you just saw me pop up is one that I had planned on doing. Well, I bought that kit, part of it, anyways, Black Friday. So months prior to this. See, there's our pivot pin, has the detent in it. so it's not captured. And gray and green was the concept of that build. That's what I wanted to do. Didn't even think about the fact that the 601s are gray and green. Look inside, you can see everything is standard modern bit. So if you wanted to cheat, you could put a different trigger in here easily. But nice and cleanly done, and these are marked as manufactured by Brownells, which I think is pretty cool. I don't know where it's all coming, where all the parts are being sourced from, but Brownells definitely went above and beyond to find period correct looking stuff with some modern flair. We can see our bolt carrier group is all chrome lined, as the originals were. No little notches for that forward assist, so that's accurate there. Give you a look at the staking on there. And it looks like we've got impediment of that bolt movement on both sides, which is how it's supposed to be. We'll see if we have the upgraded style of extractor in there or not. Get some pick at there. How many of you have a punch that went into the wrong size punch into a pin and ended up trapping a roll pin? Much frustration that day, but it still works as a pin puller. Firing pin. So it does come very nicely greased. Knock out our cam pin. Our bolt, which fit nice and tight. You can see it has been magnetic particle inspected. That's what that MP marking means. And then to take a look at our extractor, it sure feels like it's been upgraded. And it has. So what I was looking at there is that bit of rubber around the spring serves to help, well, do a little shock absorbing and prolong the life of the extractor. That is an upgrade that hit the military while I was in service. So of course decades before this gun, or decades after this gun conceptually existed, but it's still a good upgrade to have. I'll wipe some of this excess off. Gun has clearly been test fired, and you can see we've got a nice chrome lining inside of our carrier. Tough to see in there with light and camera angle, but what gives it away usually is you can see a definitive line all the way around there. So when we get this out to the range, we'll of course do a multi-mag test, put some ultra-modern plastic mags in, and see how those run, as well as our multi-load accuracy testing. I'm really curious with this 1 in 12 twist to see how it's going to like some of the really light loads. You know, we've got like 35 grain varmint loads and 40 grain, things along that line, and of course we'll throw in some of the heavier stuff. Hopefully by the time this video is out, you've watched our 69 grain viewer request video. We did a roundup of a whole bunch of 68 and 69 grain loads, as you all requested multiple times, and shot them through a couple different guns. But this is a cool piece of history that is very lightweight and very simple handling. It reminds me refreshingly of how great the AR platform can be as a carry gun, carry rifle that is, when you don't have a whole bunch of extra stuff hanging off of it. You know, this is a minimalist setup. Good on Brownells for recreating the look and feel, and maybe even some of the performance. They even come with these cool preventative maintenance magazines. I forget the nickname we had for these. These were still floating around at the beginning of my service. I don't know if they still make them or not. Print it upside down, but it's basically a comic book that describes maintenance of your gun in simplest of terms. The lore is that the military, well, the Army, started making these because they found that most soldiers were poorly educated, had a very low reading level, and your standard manuals, let alone NCOs yelling at you, was not very inspirational to do a good job. So by turning it into something like putting Maggie together, and Maggie being your magazine, into this fun format, I guess you could call it, of maintenance, it made it a little more engaging, and ideally soldiers would take better care of their stuff. Unfortunately, at least while I was in, you didn't see a whole lot of these floating around. When one came out, it disappeared quickly, or it went to the first sergeant's office, and then, well, never made it to Joe who needed it. So, very cool that Brownells includes those. Amazing historical preservation here. And if you're looking for a real 601, my last search on Gunbroker showed them around 32 grand. So to have one you can shoot and not worry about destroying history is really cool. This is a great educational tool, and also a great way to just get back to the simplicity of it and experience why this rifle came into service. This condition, or this setup, the 601, was adopted by the Air Force when it was shown to the Army and Marines. You got crusty, grumbly guys going, rah, 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 plastic, aluminum, rah, rah, rah. We like our walnut and steel. And so the Air Force looked at it and said, hey, our gate guards could use that. That looks pretty comfy to carry around. Whether that's mocking the Air Force or not, it was a smart idea and the right idea. And decades later, the AR-15 and M16 are not only still the standard, but have become quite iconic. So good on the Air Force for choosing the easy way in a rifle to sling, because it turned out to be the right choice overall. Next video you'll see on this will be at the range. Looking forward to how that 1 in 12 twist will do, and just the overall handlings of it. Really cool piece. I'm really grateful to Brownells for reproducing these. Let me know what your thoughts are on owning a classic like this, even if it is reproduction. Would you own one? Do you own one? Why or why not? Thanks for watching.